9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I believe everyone, we are live on Facebook. If you've just joined us, don't worry, everyone else has. We're live. We thought tonight it would be really fun and really cool of us to just keep you waiting. So we're really sorry about that. It was basically my fault. And Alex would like me to tell you that the reason she's wearing those headphones like Dr. Dre, like a 90s R&B star, though they went out in the 90s, is we had a few sound problems, but they were on my desk, just lying around. That's just the kind of thing that I leave lying around in my house. So Alex has got them. But I'm going to hand over really because Alex, you're the host for tonight. So take it away. And I wonder if the other panelists could just mute their microphones, just maybe when they're not talking, because we're just getting a tiny bit of feedback, and then we'll just stay with your finger ready to go, and we'll get you in.
Well, we're so excited tonight to not only be in the Jan and Andrew Miller studios, but here in DY, in Avalon, and in New York. So we really are a truly cosmopolitan collection tonight, and particularly grateful to Monique. Monique, what time did you have to get up this morning to be with us?
I got up at 5, I think.
I'm so sorry.
It's my pleasure.
I'm so sorry.
It's so nice. I love it.
You look incredibly fresh-faced and ready to go, considering you've already warned me that you're not a morning person. So thank you. We are doubly grateful to you. Phil, we're also grateful to you. So thank you for being a part of this. We're really grateful. Where are you joining us from? By the looks of it, your spare room, maybe?
Our spare room. No, this is our bedroom.
It's your bedroom. How appropriate for tonight.
It's where the magic happens.
Yeah.
Oh, I love it.
With our picture above the bed, purchased in Plymouth, England.
Oh, wonderful.
Oh, that's really lovely. I feel like my bedroom would never be that tidy, so I don't know if you've done that especially for us. But either way, we're grateful. Well, I love it.
Can I ask something? I'd love to know from Monique, because this is really exciting having someone from America like 2 weeks in a row. But Monique, whereabouts are you? Like, I thought I was going to get a view of Central Park for this whole thing.
Sadly not. It's not too far away, maybe a 5-8 minute walk from here. But so I'm in New York. We live on the Upper East Side, just close to where the Met and the Guggenheim is.
Yeah, nice.
Yeah, they're just at the end of the street.
It's quite good when you can say like something that everyone in the world's heard of, that's like kind of just on your doorstep. It's kind of cool, isn't it?
It is cool. It is cool. Just not just out the window, but it's pretty great.
And Monique, you're known to a lot of people here, but just for those who perhaps are tuning in for the first time or have just kind of rocked up at H3O in the last couple of months, tell us the link, because people will know you and then really won't know you at all.
My link to H3O, do you mean?
Yeah.
Oh, right. So my family has been going to H3O now for 8.5 years, 9 years, maybe around about that. And we love H3O. H3O we consider to be our church family, and DY is our home, but we're just over in New York for a couple of years with my husband's work. We moved over last July, and just temporarily. We'll be back soon.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing. Well, it's a total treat. We had the whole family there this morning, and the kids were joining in the breakout rooms, and now we've got you tonight, so it's a total treat. I wondered, there's all sorts of things, all sorts of directions we could go in this morning, or this morning for you, but I wondered whether just as people are landing and they're grabbing their glass of wine or grabbing their a cup of tea, and they're settling down in front of this evening's gathered panel, I wondered whether I could just throw out to you, so we're focusing on relationships. We're going to dive into that in a moment, but I wonder if we could start with maybe a relationship fail, and that might be in your current relationships, or it might have been, if you're really going kind of back many years, it might be early days, friendship, relationships of any kinds. But I wonder if you'd be willing to share a fail. I was thinking I ought to go first because I'm throwing that out to you. So I'll
Alex,
check in.
Can I interrupt? I'm really sorry.
Yes.
Can you make sure that yours doesn't end up with marrying me, that isn't like a fail? Because otherwise that's going to kind of like, ruin the vibe of the evening. And just to say as well, if you're at home and you're watching, like, feel free to comment below about your relationship fail. There's lots
Please
of great
do.
stuff coming in, Alex, before you go. So there's loads of people watching,
Amazing.
which is great. Record breaking views. I think it must be because we've got a guest from New York, but everyone is saying without fail that they're not pleased to see me, you, or even Phil, but they're so pleased to see Monique. So everyone's
Very
saying hi,
pleased to
Monique, to you. So anyway,
love
Alex,
that.
tell us about your relationship fail that isn't me. That'd be great.
I love it. So the one I always thought I'd bring to this circle of trust that we're extending to all you lovely people at home. Please do share your relationship fails. I was just struck by this awful moment, and I think I was about 15, which maybe lets me off some of this. So it was very early days of even working out what it was to date, and I think I'd had one previous boyfriend, and this was like boyfriend number 2, and I didn't really know what I was doing. I didn't know how to break up with someone, and this relationship wasn't really going to go anywhere, and I did not know how to break up with this guy. And it was in the days where you get the bus home, and so I thought the moment to tell him was on the bus, so that we had time to talk, and then we would get off at our different stops and walk home. And so I thought this is the perfect time to tell him. And so I'd written him a letter, which feels so kind of like from another world now. But I'd written him a letter to tell him that I thought it was time to part ways. And this letter got passed the whole way back to his row on the bus. So everyone on the bus had read it by the end of that journey, and then finally got to him. And so I think he was probably like the last person to know on the whole bus. And this was like a bus crammed with school kids. It was awful. It was literally awful. And that I was therefore known as the girl who broke up with the guy on the bus for a long, long time after that. And it was just not good. Not good anyway. So I feel pretty ashamed of that. And I'm bringing that to this circle of trust, and I hope you'll deal with me gently. But yeah, I don't know if anyone else is willing to share. It doesn't have to be that distant dark past. It can be more recent if you prefer. But tell us, Monique, tell us a fail from your, please put me out of my misery. Tell me you failed.
This was hard, thinking through this question, because it's how do you find a relationship fail that hits the sweet spot of being funny and not, terribly tragic to share at the beginning of a gathering like this. But I thought of one from when Dave and I were dating, and it's with his dad, who is now my father-in-law. And it was the first time, it wasn't the first time that I'd met him, but he lived overseas, so I didn't get to see him very often, and I didn't know him very well. And they invited me to family Christmas, and so I had to work out. I wanted to give him a gift, so I was trying to work out what would be a good gift to give my father-in-law. My dad, I always just gave him socks and undies, but I felt like that was inappropriate for a dad that was not my own. And so the family decided that they were going to buy him a barbecue, and I thought, oh great, I'll get him some barbecue tools. But then, being like, I was in my early 20s, I didn't really know appropriate barbecue tools to buy. I ended up buying him a giant fork, just a really big fork, like a quite ornate, beautiful looking, but really impractical fork, which I felt good about at the time. But then when I gave it to him on Christmas Day and he unwrapped it, they hadn't given him the barbecue, and they never told me that they had changed their plans. He was very gracious and very kind. I felt very awkward. Yeah.
We've got some coming in online, Monique, and they're loving it. They're loving that online, Monique. It's good. Lauren Saunders says when Ewan, her now husband, just to be clear, if you're tuning in at home and you don't know these people, when she was first asked out, she didn't say yes.
Oh.
So he must have persevered. So that one's good.
Oh, that's a bit awkward. Thanks for bringing that to the circle of trust.
Sue says, when Greg and I were going out, I bought him a CD for his birthday 2 years in a row. I've never lived it down, despite me having nailed his presents every time since then. There we go.
We're really going to see like other sides of people, aren't we, tonight? I love it. This is brilliant.
We need a soundboard.
Phil, you have to tell us your relationship fail, and Dan, I think you probably do too.
Oh, I don't know
from the guys.
I don't know that I can do a better job than what you guys have done. Well, I thought of like in relationships, when there's a fail, it can be because the other person's not willing to come to the table. But I thought of one where I think where I haven't been able to come to the table, and it's still a relationship that I actually struggle with. It was a weird sort of relationship where I never felt heard, and where I always felt like the child, like it was like parent. And the only way I coped was really to withdraw from that relationship. So just feeling on edge all the time in a conversation with that person meant that it was really hard to move forward. So
absolutely. No, I totally hear you. Dan, tell us a relationship fail from your life.
Well, there was
I don't want to direct where you go.
Yeah, sorry, I feel like I'm taking the tone down again, but thanks for that, Phil. Like, it's good. Like, thanks for the vulnerability.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I didn't prepare one, so here's just one off the top of my head.
This is dangerous. This is very dangerous.
Yeah, indeed. Yeah, basically, I had this girlfriend who was like my first proper girlfriend. Her name was, let's think of a different name beginning with R. I know you said Rhonda then, Phil, but that's your wife.
Let's not call her Rhonda.
All right, we'll call her Rachel. And this girl, Rachel, was like my first girlfriend. Obviously, I thought I was in love, the whole lot. She wrote me this letter about us like being really serious, and like all these like things that we needed to think about because our relationship was getting more and more serious. And I was like, oh my goodness, this is great. And then right before I went away to Jesus camp, she dumped me, right, which was horrible. But what makes it worse, when I got back from Jesus camp, she. Do
you need to tell us what Jesus camp is, Dan? I'm not sure people know what Jesus camp is.
Jesus camp is like one of those Christian holidays we used to call Jesus. It wasn't called Jesus camp. We just called it. But when I came back, she'd been going off with my best mate Richard, and even to this day, like, we're good friends, but he's not my best mate anymore because of that one thing. So yeah, that was quite a bad one.
So Richard, if you're watching,
I'm still hurt. Yeah, he knows. He's a naughty
maybe
boy,
tonight is the night. Maybe reconciliation will come. Well, we jest, but actually tonight we are going to dive into this whole kind of we're going to dive into this whole idea of relationships, but we're actually going to go through the lens of the prayer of St. Francis of Assisi, which might seem a little bit kind of off the charts, but Jan very wisely, like, when I'm older, I want to be like Jan Miller, because anything she shares with us and kind of throws into vision and future direction. Oh, there she is often worth listening to. And she suggested that we delved into the prayer of St. Francis of Assisi, and it's an amazing prayer that we're going to pray each week over the next few weeks, and we're going to move through the prayer. And the first line, so make me a channel of your peace, where there is hatred, let me bring your love. This idea of sowing love, that's what we're going to kind of dive into tonight. And we're going to look at the idea, or the whole kind of area of relationships. Now, we want to try and focus on relationships and understand that relationships of every kind are under strain currently, whether that's kind of outward stresses, whether that's the kind of the particular season that we're in. COVID-19 has changed everything, really, and so we want to look at relationships and understand and name that relationships of every kind are under strain, and just delve into that a little bit tonight as we start this series. And I guess the question for us tonight really is going to be, how do we strengthen our relationships in this season? How do we take the good and the learning from this time and strengthen our relationships kind of going forward? So we're just going to start really briefly, because we began a little bit later than we planned, just by hearing the reading. And as you hear it, Monique, we're going to ask you to read it if that's still okay. But as you hear it read to you, I guess I want to invite you, a bit like we have done in previous weeks, just to hear the reading and notice one word or phrase as you hear it through. We'll just hear it once and then we'll return to it a little bit later. But we're going to hear that first as we begin. And as you hear that word or phrase that particularly stands out to you, why don't you just comment on that below, as we have done in previous weeks? That would be great. So the reading is 1 Corinthians 13 verses 4 to 8.
Love is patient, love is kind, love is not envious or boastful or arrogant or rude. It does not insist on its own way. It is not irritable or resentful. It does not rejoice in wrongdoing, but rejoices in the truth. It bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. Love never ends.
Thanks, Monique. It's a passage many of us will have heard. We might have heard it at weddings. We might have kind of come across it in picking up the Bible. It's a passage that might well be familiar, but perhaps something jumped out at you tonight. And Dan, you're going to get us just briefly to check in on last week and just kind of clock that in our minds.
Yeah, just to say while I'm doing that, if people want to comment below, it's great seeing the conversation so far, but if people want to comment on that below, like if there's one word from that reading that jumps out at you, why don't you share that now, and we're going to refer back to that later. So if one thing jumps out at you from the reading, just tap that in below. We'd love to hear from you. I've preached on that 100 times because when I was an Anglican vicar, I used to do weddings all the time, and that would be the passage they chose. And part of you wants to be annoyed at that, but partly it's like, it is the best passage. It's just beautiful. There's so much profound language in there. So just why don't you comment, pick one word. I've just posted it below. But yeah, just to recap on last week, we talked about this idea of checking in, and we were thinking about the rule of life. And me and JC not Jesus Christ, John Kavanagh made a commitment to kind of go on this journey and try and check in this week. And I'd love others to do that as well. If you committed to do something last week, if you were listening, then comment below, let us know how you went. But I committed to turn my phone off for the whole of Saturday, to run the battery down, and then not look at it, just have like a tech-free Saturday. So what I'd like is like a drum roll, please, like wherever you're sitting, if you're watching at home, if you're on the panel, just drum roll. And I'm going to let you know that I absolutely failed. No, I didn't fail too badly. Basically, me and I sort of forgot to run my phone out, and I was trying to buy stuff on Facebook Marketplace again, my usual like kind of go-to. But but I did go for a walk with Matt actually, who's watching, which was great, and I left my phone behind. And I did something else in the evening and left my phone behind. But in the middle of the day, I was kind of buying stuff online. But it was good. And today, after church, I went for a quick walk. I left my phone at home, and I'm just loving that because it stops me like just go into it in those moments and do that. So it was half and half for me. I'll let John comment on how he went with his one, but that's the check-in this week. And the idea behind this is to encourage us, not to be legalistic, but just to encourage us to just try stuff. And I think there's going to be some challenges online off the back of today's session as well. So thanks, Alex.
Yeah, great, brilliant. Well, I guess we want to dive straight into the kind of conversation to hear from our panel as well. And I guess I wanted to start with this idea. We've heard a lot about this idea of all being in the same boat together, and this, I guess, this narrative that we're in a really unifying time, we're all experiencing something together. And while there is some truth in that, this idea that we are, in some senses, experiencing something that we are internationally feeling on some level, there's a kind of carrying that together. Yet the reality is that we are in such different boats, and depending on our circumstances, we're experiencing COVID-19 in such a different way, depending on where we are, depending on who we're with, depending on our support networks, our safety net, our ability to continue to work. All sorts of factors are kind of impacting that, and almost that we're perhaps not even in. Perhaps we're in the same storm but in different boats. Actually, maybe that's not even true. Maybe the reality is that we are, depending on where we are in the world and our kind of circumstances, actually we're very close to the epicenter of the storm, or we're a long way away from it. And I was struck by that, I guess, as I was talking to Monique, that actually even the kind of where we are in the world is hugely impacting how we're experiencing that. So I thought I'd throw it out to our panel. Just what boat are you in? Tell us about your situation, who you're in the boat with, and a bit about, I guess, the highs and lows of that. And so we'll start with that and kind of throw that out to everyone in the panel, really. Monique, perhaps I could chuck that to you first. Tell us about your boat.
Yeah, sure. So we're in New York, which obviously is really seriously affected by the coronavirus at the moment. And I've found it strangely, and I don't know if comforting is the right word, but there's a sense of unity for me when I look at the news and I see how this is something that really, like, the majority of the world is grappling with at the same time. In my lifetime, I can't think of another incident or event or tragedy like that, when you look at news articles and you see images of people in other parts of the world facing the same experiences that we're facing. And I don't know, I think there's real tragedy in that, but there's comfort at the same time, I think, a sense of shared experience. And that's so my family is here at home in our apartment, and so we don't really see too much on a day-to-day basis the terrible things that are happening outside, but we do hear daily and personal experiences that people have of being terribly, terribly sick or losing their loved ones. It feels like everybody we know has lost somebody that they know, and that there's a real fear around, I think, and I think generally people are very worried and at times quite panicked as well, because it's very uncertain. And the numbers here of the death rates and the hospitalizations every day, they're lowering, but not as much as was hoped, and so there's a lot of we just don't know enough about the virus, right, about how it spreads. And so therefore, in terms of keeping ourselves and our families safe, it's hard to know exactly what we can do and what we can't do. And so I think the biggest changes for us is that we see people with masks on everywhere we go. You have to wear them. I mean, we don't really leave our apartment too much, to be honest. We went out yesterday for the first time in maybe 3 weeks or so, and we don't tend to leave, which is what most people do here in New York. But
which just to name that is very different. It's very different to what we're doing here in the Northern Beaches. Like we're all out daily, at least once a day. I think that's probably the reality for there'll be different gradients of that, and some people are being, perhaps there's pregnancy in the home, and so they're being more kind of tight and careful. It's just the shops, and maybe a walk to the park and back. But I think that is very different to our reality, to have not left home for 3 weeks. Thanks, Monique, that's really helpful.
The other thing that we found really interesting too is seeing how in Australia you have so many rules in place, and it's how it's so policed by the government as well, and people are getting fines, and there's none of that happening here. I think it's just that the seriousness of the situation is so real and so present. When you do go out on the street, you don't really see very many people, and that's very strange for a New York street. And so the gravity, I guess, and the seriousness means that people tend to stay inside and stay home anyway.
Yeah. So your boat is you and your family in an apartment with Dave working now at home. Yeah. And you're all in the same space, kind of working that out. That's your boat.
Yeah, Dave works in the bedroom. So he goes from his bed to his desk to his, small and movement space. And then the kids, Max and Luella, are both doing their school full-time at home from our lounge room, and Annabelle does the best she can to fit in with all of that, and it was just announced on Friday, so we've been home for 7 weeks now, and then it was just announced on Friday afternoon that schools are closed now for the rest of the school year, and so that's June, not December, but there's some speculation that even in September, when the kids are due to go back to school, that nobody's sure yet whether that might be able to happen or not. So I found that shift comforting, to be honest, to know now I've got some clarity around and time frames, whereas up until then we didn't know whether the kids were going to go back to school soon or not. But it is, I feel so excited for you guys there that the restrictions are lifting. You can see people again. My goodness, I think there must be a real hope in the air. Whereas over here, we're very much in I feel like it's like just in a season of endurance. But we can set good rhythms and foundations down now. We know it's going to be at least another 6 weeks, I guess, before the end of the school year anyway.
Thanks, Monique. Yeah, it does feel like a different. I think when I chatted to you just the other day, and I was going out for a walk while just before I talked to you, and and just struck by how different our worlds were at that point. And you were talking about everybody within your friendship groups, everyone on your little WhatsApp groups, everyone you were connecting with there in the US. Had lost somebody, and that just, I think that doesn't feel like our reality. And just really conscious of that when we were talking. Thank you for showing what your boat is and where you are and what you're experiencing. Phil, just to throw the same question to you, tell us about your boat briefly. What's your boat?
Several images come to mind. In one image is I feel a lot of the time that I'm on a boat on a calm sea. But the other image that comes to mind for me personally is I'm a bit like a duck, looking nice and relaxed up top, not stressed, and paddling underneath. So, I mean, in one sense, being retired means that I don't have that busy routine that I've lost. I've already got a bit of a routine that's based around the apartment that I live in with Rhonda and my son Glenn, and the local area. So it's not as big a change for me as it would be for somebody who's actually still working. So the stressful side of things for me, the good part for me is that I've got lots of indoor hobbies as well as outdoor ones that keep me going. So I've got tons of stuff. I haven't been bored on any day. I've always got choices that I can make for how I want to use my time. The things that are hard are not being able to see people. That's that's our family, the grandkids, and just friends and community. So that's the hard thing. And we're seeing our grandkids, 2 of our grandkids, for the first time next weekend. We haven't seen them for about 6 weeks, so that's been hard. So yeah, not much stress. Going to the supermarket is something I've learnt to hate, because the aisles aren't 1.5 meters wide, so you can't pass somebody without getting close. So
Phil, we've had a question come in. Sorry, a really good one. What are your indoor hobbies? Like that.
This is the man of many hobbies.
Just like 1 or 2. I'd love to know because I need an indoor hobby that isn't Netflix.
I have 45,000 photos in my photo library, so I've gone back and started editing them and doing all sorts of stuff. Every time we go out walking, I take my phone with me and come back with at least 10 photos that I can spend my time editing. There's a few videos that I've made. I'm writing my family history, which is nearly War and Peace. So yeah,
that could be next week's episode.
So lots of indoor hobbies. But look, the other thing is that what a place to live in if you're locked down. I mean, it's 400 meters walk to the beach, and there's umpteen different choices you can make between where you walk. So you've only got to get outdoors for an hour or 2 a day to relieve that inner feeling of being locked down. So for us, we're just very fortunate.
And that's what you're reflecting on the phone to me, that your boat felt pretty safe and pretty you're conscious that your boat was different to many other boats. I hope you don't mind as well. I'm going to chip in some some thoughts and reflections tonight as well from the wonderful Kate Waters, who would love to be here, and I was kind of planning to be for much of this week. But the reality of being a single mum with a gorgeous little one just meant that actually that was going to be a bit of a challenge with bedtime. So she may just by magic appear on this panel at some point, which would be a complete bonus. But she gave me a few thoughts just to chip in, and I wanted to make sure her voice was heard too, really, because we are just a small representation of so many different relationships and groups who are within our church and kind of within our community. So she was reflecting. So she's working both at home and at school, and she was talking about Coco also spending some time working at home, but also just about being in school as well, because the reality of her trying to teach and do a good job of that and be teaching Coco at the same time just wasn't working at all. And she very quickly learned that, and so is doing a bit of both, and just so appreciative of her parents really leaning into that space and kind of caring for Coco in a way that she wasn't able to kind of be able to do in the same way as normal. And she was really conscious. I think she was just talking about how her boat felt like very challenging, but it also she was just so conscious of kind of suddenly what she treasured, and that coming right to the fore, and watching kind of family members lose jobs and suddenly be conscious that that to have the security of her work and family who are leaning in was just not something that could be guaranteed for everybody. So she was very conscious that it was challenging, but there was also much to celebrate as well. So thank you. Maybe at home you're reflecting a bit about what your boat is. For a moment we're gonna zoom in to Phil and just hear a bit more from Phil, because Phil, I think you are probably by quite some our longest married on the panel. I think you've probably been married longer than I've been alive, so
yeah, I think so.
you've got a lot of experience. We want to kind of just dive into that for a moment. In fact, Monique, you might even want to just have a little pause, have a little break. Do you want to just turn off your camera just for kind of the next 5 minutes or so, and give yourself a break? Then you can have a cup of tea and not kind of have the eyes of the world on you. But Phil, tell us, because you've been married how many years now to the wonderful Wanda?
July this year, it'll be 42 years.
42 years. That is amazing. That is amazing. Well, you have been married longer than I've been alive, which is always good to remind our wonderful elders of. But you've done. It feels like you are one of many who are kind of these incredible godparents almost to the church that I'm learning more and more as someone who's relatively new to the church. But you've done life and you've done marriage for 42 years almost, and there's not just marriage in there. There's relationships with kids, there's relationship with grandparents, with your own parents, and in all sorts of other relationships that we won't even have time to kind of dive into. But I guess what I wanted to throw to you is someone who's done particularly married life for such an incredible length of time. Tell us a bit about what you have learnt, particularly what builds a strong marriage, what builds strong foundations. What have been your lessons? Tell us a bit.
I suppose the first thing that came to mind was pause before you engage your brain. Pause and engage your brain before you speak, which is something that I'm still learning. That's really important, because it's too easy to, in the heat of a moment, to say something that you don't really believe anyway. It's hurtful to the other person. So that's a real, you just think before you speak. Two words that come, compromise and forgiveness, come to mind. Compromise means that you're thinking of the other person as much as you're thinking about yourself, and that's a pretty important thing, I think, in building a partnership. Not always needing to win the argument. To learn to value the other person, to know that, to be able to just except that, well, you learn to know that you're not always right. So to be able to stop this off and not think, I don't have to win this.
And depending on your personality type, that is a particular challenge for some of us that need to be right. Like, you know, if you've got that kind of that justice thread in you, there's it can be hard to let go of that one.
Yeah, and even today, the other one that comes to mind is that allow the other person to talk without interrupting, even if you disagree. So yeah, all of those things are hard.
That's really helpful.
And it doesn't matter if you're married for 42 years or 2 years. There are things you have to keep learning each day. Yeah.
And Phil, tell us they are all really helpful and quite profound lessons that I imagine most of us are still learning and grappling with. But I wonder if I could I just imagine in those 42 years, and I know just from even just some of what you've talked about your life and kind of where you moved to and changes that you would have gone through. But I guess there would have been particular seasons where there would have been high levels of change or just high levels of challenge, like maybe the first time you had kids, or just changes that have happened in your life that have meant you've had to kind of navigate a new season. Tell us a bit about how you and Rhonda have kind of navigated that. What's made the difference? What's allowed you to kind of keep heading forward in the same direction together?
Well, I suppose we're both fortunate in a way that the big changes have been an adventure more than anything else. And you know, there was a time when we lost a lot of younger and older family members. It was almost like 4 or 5 people died within about a 4 or 5 month period. And that was a time of difficulty. We've had 2 big moves, which have left friends, family, and our church community behind. But in all of the time, all of the occasions I can think of, we navigated it together. We talked about it, and we prayed together about it. And I think that it's the navigating, it's sharing your thoughts, your feelings, just walking the road together makes a really big difference. And that's really important when relationships are involved, because there is a sadness in leaving communities behind when you move from one location to another. So I think my main advice for us, like I said, it's been more of an adventure than anything else when there have been big changes, but it's just doing it together.
So leaning in when you could choose to lean out.
I've lost.
Yeah, the choosing.
Are you back?
Ah. Oh,
Phil,
sorry.
Phil sounds like we can still hear you, mate, but there's a bit of loudness that comes and go. I don't know if something's changed on there, mate, but just while you're looking into that, we've had a couple of things that have come in from online. Firstly, we've got some international visitors, some from Albania, some from Morocco. So I definitely didn't Google how to say hi to them, but we sent them a message. But Beck's got some really helpful stuff. She said, Brené Brown says, when emotion is high, cognition is low, which kind of links in with what Phil was saying. And it's such a tough time, and at the moment, and just to consider that you're both on the same side when you're going through those tough times, like whenever there's an argument, like actually we're on the same team. Alex is nodding away.
No, it's good. It's really good. I'm nodding because it's good stuff.
And just something Phil said
really
at the
helpful.
end, which links in again with what Beck's saying. She's great, Beck. It's like a philosopher. She said that her and Matt were just talking last night together that in their marriage they want to have the posture of curiosity. So in leaning forward and looking out, they never want to land. You could probably think about that for the next half an hour in silence and reflect on that. But yeah, I just wanted to let you know about the conversation online. Guys, keep commenting if you've got questions. Keep jumping in. It's great.
Can I just add one more thing?
Yeah, do throw it in.
I think what Rhonda and I have done that's really helped as well in difficult times or times of change, we've actually sought out community and friendship in the areas that we've moved into, or at the time something is happening, rather than faced it on our own. There's a real strength in community.
There really is, and that's such an interesting dynamic, isn't it? I'm still learning about what it looks like, how people navigate and negotiate sharing themselves here in Australia. I'm new to that, but certainly in the UK, people are still incredibly private, particularly when it comes to marriage and to kind of doing life with other people, and just, you know, there are things that you want to go to your partner with first, if we're talking about kind of a marriage context, but actually there's so many occasions where it's helpful to do that in community with others, with mentors, with people that are married and have been married longer. That's really helpful stuff. Phil, thank you so much. We're gonna let you go for now. I know you're going to stay online and continue to comment and engage, but thank you for sharing from your almost 42 years of marriage experience, not to be taken lightly. And yeah, we're thrilled. Perhaps there will be able to be a party.
Rhonda doesn't look old enough. I can't believe it. I just can't believe it.
Well done. Almost
got married.
Look, that's a compliment, Jan. That's a compliment. Look how well I looked after her, if that's the case.
All right, we're going to go now before that descends.
Yeah, thank you.
No, thank you, Phil. Really appreciate it. Do stick around and comment. Monique, we're going to ask to bring you back in as well.
Coming back. Sorry to interrupt.
Do, of course, yeah.
Never interrupt your wife in marriage. That's my advice. So I'm going to be doing it late tonight. I'm really sorry. Jan just posted something really helpful, putting the problem / situation out in front and looking at it together rather than between them and pushing them apart. And that reminded me a bit of like me and Alex are doing some coaching training at the moment, which is really good stuff. And one of the ways that they kind of train us, this lady that does it, she's like a guru. She's wonderful, Claire, if you're watching, and she would literally with someone she was coaching stand side by side and lay stuff out on the floor, and you'd kind of look at the problem together and move like different mats around or objects, and yeah, it's so helpful. Like, it's insightful stuff. It really unlocks stuff. So yeah, everyone's saying hi to Annabelle and Monique, so I'm gonna let you guys get back to it. And
Annabelle's getting a special shout out. It is a joy to have you, Annabelle. It really is. Well, Monique, we have so many things we could ask you, and I feel like even in the short time, I mean, I've got to know you a bit over WhatsApp, and I got to meet you over the camera a few times before I got to meet you. That over the months kind of before we moved out to Australia, and I feel like there's always more that could be said. So we're only going to get a slice of your insights, really. But tell us briefly. Just, I guess, again, for those that don't know, just tell us a bit about what you've done kind of professionally, or what your roles have been up to recently.
Yeah, sure. So over here in New York, I'm not working, but when I was back home in Australia, my most recent work, was I had a private practice. I'm a social worker, and so I was providing counselling to children and families in DY. Most of that work is with kids with a background of abuse and trauma, and so a lot of kids in foster care or who have been adopted, but then other types of families as well. And then the other part of my work was doing assessments, child protection assessments for our children's court, and so that's providing information to the magistrate of the children's court about whether a child should go into foster care or should go back home to their birth families.
Yeah, thank you. That's really helpful, I guess, just particularly for people that haven't had a chance to meet you before. I wonder if we could delve into the world briefly of, so we're here in this strange season of COVID, and we're negotiating that and working that out down a day-to-day, really. And I don't know about you, but I've sensed that there are this kind of strange set of kind of pressures and expectations that are building for many people that really seem to range. Like I was talking to I think it was my sister at one point. So she is my gorgeous sister who's living here in Australia as well, and she's single, and she's just come back from New York, actually having kind of had to finish her MBA and kind of come back here and leave her placement early. And she's almost got this pressure and expectation that no one's actually stated to her, I don't think, but there's almost this sense of, as a single woman right now, I should be studying 5 languages and I should be kind of learning a new recipe a day because I've got all this time. And then I feel like I've talked to other people, like I talked to Kate, and she's got this kind of pressure and this weight of, you know, I'm a teacher, I work with kids with additional needs, and I can't seem to teach my own child. And it's like this strange world we've like walked into where we are holding all these expectations. I just wondered if you had any insights into this strange set of expectations we seem to be carrying. A lot of us are carrying.
Yeah, I think it is really strange. I feel the same sorts of pressures, and I think they're partly external and I think they're partly internal too, right? So when we first started to hear about this, what they call it in New York is just shelter in place, not a lockdown, but a shelter in place. And I thought, this is great. I'm going to get so much stuff done. I had this whole list of kind of tasks that I wanted to do. One which was sort through I've got 30,000 photos on my phone, and I thought, excellent, I'll go through all of those. And I had heaps of things that I thought that I would get to. And now 7 weeks later, I've barely scraped the surface of the things on that list. And for a time there, I was thinking, what's wrong with me? Why can't I get these things done? So I've been doing lots of reflecting on that, actually, myself. I really liked some of the writing and reflections that I've read around where people have named this as a time of grieving. You know, I think that really rings true for me, that whenever there's change, there's grieving, right? But particularly now, we're all living in this unreal circumstance, and there is grieving to do around the loss of our lives and all of those things that we took for granted. I find that really helpful to remember. And the other thing I find really helpful too is just recognizing that even if we're not personally experiencing the worst things that are happening right now out in the world, I think it helps to keep perspective and remember that, you know, for some people this is a season of real tragic circumstances, you know, and people are facing really incredibly difficult things. But even if you're not, I think there's still heightened anxiety for most of us around, and the fears of the unknown, about the prospect of sickness, and not really understanding how to keep ourselves safe. And then also just the kind of vicarious trauma of the hearing all of the stories that are around all of the time. So I've noticed in myself some signals in my body that mean that I'm dealing with an elevated level of stress at the moment. So when people are grieving or when people are stressed, you know, you don't expect people to then be like smashing a to-do list, right? Like that's not the time when you're going to be really able to churn through things. And I know for me too, I was really looking forward to having my kids at home. I love school holidays. I love school holidays with them. And I've always wanted to try homeschooling too. So I thought, how fantastic. But doing the school set program with my children is not it's not the same as how I would do it if it were for myself. And we would be spending a lot of time outdoors exploring, and whereas we're home, all of us together 24/7, and dealing with my children's stress levels in that as well. Oh, there you are. Sorry, you moved on my screen.
I'm still here. Yeah, I did move. Yeah, I think Dan's playing with something. We'll just let him do that.
That's okay.
Oh, you're back.
I found you. You're good. And so I you know, I think when you think about it through those kind of lenses, then I think it makes sense. And I also am very aware that I am in very privileged circumstances. Like Dave has a very secure job right now. We're in this really beautiful space of this apartment where we get to spend our time. We have access to resources that mean that we're able to kind of make life choices to make this time easier for us. We can afford to buy food you know, the equipment that the kids needed we could access for their schooling. And for a lot of people right now, that's not the case. And I think that's something that is really important for us to keep in mind. That helps me to keep perspective often as well. And like the rates of unemployment here in America are unbelievable. Like 30 million people have filed for unemployment since the pandemic started, which is just like mind-blowing. 30 million people. Yeah. And I read the other day that they're forecasting Australia's unemployment to rise to 10%. You know, that's super high, isn't it?
It's huge. Yeah.
Yeah. And so then whenever there is stress around like that, then I think that often people turn to some really unhealthy ways of coping with stress. And I keep in mind too that for people that are socially isolated and that were dealing with struggles before this shelter in place or the lockdown started, that being socially isolated may actually be quite a dangerous situation for them. So I'm thinking specifically of people who are perhaps in violent relationships, or for people where suicide is an issue for them. And we know that rates of both of those things, as well as mental illness, have risen and significantly. And it's really hard when you're in a situation like that. It's hard enough to access help under the best of circumstances. And so when all of a sudden all of your support system is taken away, you're not able to go out and meet people face to face, or to have an escape from your home environment, then that is just compounded really significantly.
There's a lot in there. That's been really helpful. And I think you and I talked a bit about particularly with some of these like rather bizarre expectations that we can't even quite pin down because we're not sure where they come from, but it seems to be this weird mix of internal and external messages that we're getting, where we're making these huge lists, or we're planning. You know, I bought paint at the start of this thinking I'd paint the house. Like when was that going to happen? Like, honestly, what was I thinking? But I imagined in some kind of strange version of this that we were going to have all this free time to handle stuff. And that's not happened at all. We've just about, managed to get our in-laws on flights home, and I don't know what's happened since they've gone, really. But life continues, and there's things that need to be done, and people that need caring for. It's a strange time, but I guess there was something in what we were sharing about, which was, and it came up again in what you were sharing, where just the importance of particularly if you've got some of those extra kind of challenges that maybe were there before, but the importance of self-care and keeping it pretty simple, actually, like keeping it pretty simple. But there's an importance to kind of start with self-care.
I think for me, what I have realized is that if I feed my family, and if we get through the basics of our day, and we intentionally set aside some time to connect with each other, and people are generally okay, then I feel like I'm winning, right? Like, I think it really helps me to keep my expectations really low at the moment, and recognizing that that's totally fine, that there is joy to be found in this season of all being together at home. Absolutely, there is. There's lots that I've really enjoyed about it, but it's okay to not get to that really long list of things to do. Then the other thing I find really helpful too is just reframing. So instead of seeing it as a forced imposition, if I think, well, actually, this is my choice. I think that's easier here in in America, because it is our choice whether we go out or stay home. But it's my choice to stay home to keep other people safe. Or it's my choice to support my family in doing what they need to do in order to get their things done today. And I find that gives me a different mindset for going about the day. I think it really helps me too to recognize that my kids and my husband are all experiencing the same elevated level of stress that I am. So to be gracious in my expectations of them, and in my in my way that I respond to them too, remembering that if they're out of sorts or they're acting out, that could well be that they're making a bid for connection with me, that they're not meaning to and act out, but that if I can respond to them with empathy, you know, and help them to reduce their stress levels, then that's ultimately going to be better for all of us. And then too, I think like it's really important for me to remember that as the mum and as a parent, I set the tone for my household, you know, so I really need to look after myself, because it's me and my husband together that give out and keep our little bubble kind of ticking along, you know. And so one of my kids in particular is like super sensitive. He's so beautiful. He wears his heart on his sleeve, but he's like super emotional, and he gets very stressed about very small things, and like we kind of he rides this roller coaster of emotion. And on the days when I'm not doing so well and I'm not looking after myself and I stay up too late because I want my alone time, I sometimes find that hard to be present with him and to be his like calming person. But so I am quite good now, I think, at recognizing when my stress levels are elevated. And so I have these little kind of signs that when I'm feeling triggered, I know I need to go and do something to look after myself so that I can keep giving out to them. But it's hard to do that when you're inside at home 24 hours a day. Like the things that I did before to nourish myself, I'm not able to do anymore. And I'm not always the greatest at carving out the time or talking. I really need to be talking more with Dave about him supporting me to be able to go and do that, and me supporting him to be able to go and do that too. So I think that's something that we're working on at the moment, particularly now that we know that this is extending for us too. You know, I think you've got to be really intentional about it in this season, whereas before we had good patterns and rhythms worked out. You know, everything's been rejigged.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Gosh, that is a huge challenge. I can't even quite picture what that looks like, kind of finding that time to refill, to, you know, recharge when all your normal go-tos are gone and you're doing it in that same space. That's a huge challenge. But you're right, there's an intentionality that you have to seize each day, really, don't you? You have to grab it again. It's a new day and you have to grab it again. I feel like there's a question that I keep kind of coming across, either friends are asking me or I'm asking friends, but kind of what's filling your bucket right now? And I have to keep asking myself it as well, like what is filling my bucket, because it is draining faster than it normally would. So what is filling my bucket right now?
And I just
There's
wonder,
so much, Monique, it's so good.
If people have just joined us online, if you've just checked in, we're talking about relationships today. We just heard from the wonderful Monique. If you rewind like the last 4 or 5 minutes, what she said, there was so much wisdom in there. There was so much good stuff. Like I was going to try and replay it back to you, Monique, but I just get my head around it. It's so helpful. But I really like that bit around reframing, looking for just simple wins in the day, just to celebrate. And I'd love people to just write some of that stuff down. What easy wins have you had in the last few days? Share with us. There's a few things that have come in from people online. Jan acknowledges that some people do have more time in this space, but that our role isn't about necessarily filling that time with more things, but just creating space to listen to God. And I heard something from Pete Hughes, who's leads a church called King's Cross Church in London, and he said, don't use this time to get addicted to Netflix, food or porn. Find do something useful with this time. I won't go into which ones I've fallen into in the last few weeks, but it's easy to do that, isn't it, when our lives shift, different addictions and different things come in. So that's really helpful, Jan. There's one or two other comments on there which are really great, but just lots of thanks for you, Monique, for what you've shared. I'll leave you guys to it. And
no, it's great, and we are going to have to come into land. I'm conscious we started later, so we will be going a touch later tonight than we probably would do normally. But there was something that Nick said, particularly about intentionality, that has really struck me, and I think is really key actually for us, particularly. So we are in a different scenario to New York, and we are heading into, even on Friday, just those guidelines just shifting a little bit to allowing more people into our homes, and just that you sense you're on the beginning of a slightly different trajectory. But I think what struck me about this idea of intentionality, so I came across this this quote from a psychologist who writes for The Guardian, Oliver Berkman, and he talks about this idea that when life dramatically changes, we tend to believe that life will never be the same again, and that somehow we're going to internalize we're going to internalize it, and that things will change. But actually his sense was that's not the case at all. Most of the time we just pick up where we left off, and life in many ways goes back to how it was. And so this need to actually intentionally grab hold and seize the lessons that we're learning and plan for how we're going to change things. So if there are things that we have learned and we've gathered and we've picked up in this time, that the only way to carry them into this next season, whether it is kind of post-COVID, or whether it's actually just the next level of just slightly easing and testing and experimenting and then moving to the next stage. But there's a sense, if we want to carry anything we've learned in this time, we've got to plan for it, and there's got to be an intentionality. And that takes a bit of emotional energy, I think, to get there. And it's quite hard to do in a time when you're just juggling and managing and coping with a day at a time. But there's just something about this intentionality, and I guess for you, Monique, that must be trickier to do currently than maybe it is for us who are in a slightly different season.
I think I like the way that it's this kind of shelter in place is talked about here. Is they say like New York is on pause, and I really like that, because for me a pause is it's like taking a breath, and just use Annabelle in the background, and it's a time for reflecting and I think an opportunity to just reflect and then to think through how to be intentional moving forward. But I think like when you're in the midst of it is not necessarily the time to implement the changes, right? But what we can do right now is just take note of the things that we have valued. I think it's also for me like shone a big light on what my priorities are, and so then sifting through, well, is that what I want my priorities to be or not? But I'm also okay with just sitting with that at the moment, and like, what we're just trying to do now is just get through our days, right? It's not the time to be
that's right.
making huge changes, but we can start to make some small steps in those directions by being aware of the things that we don't think are healthy in the ways that we're choosing to spend our time, or are not, edifying, or are not heading us in the direction that we want to be heading into. And
that's a really helpful distinction to make. That's a really helpful distinction to make, because you're right. I think there's this lie that can kind of seep in there that we have to kind of completely shift and change everything now. And actually, it's the noting of it. It's even just the getting it down in a journal, saying it to a friend. It's verbalized, it's noted, and that's all we have to do for now. You're absolutely right. Yeah. That's really helpful.
And then as the stress lifts, then there'll be more opportunity for a creative headspace, and that's the time that we can then go about making the change. So having accountability to other people, I think, is great, sharing some of that stuff now, but then moving forward with other people and having other people check in with us. I loved what Mark said last week about, he was talking about cranky dad, and then remember he talked about how he went through and he worked out, it sounded like it was quite a process. He worked out what were the things that were leading towards him becoming cranky dad, but then he went a step further, which I love, and then worked out what was the impetus for that behavior, and what were the messages that were influencing him to make those choices too. So that's quite a deep process, right? And that's not something that can happen quickly. It's something that he must have really worked through and then taken some time, I think, to implement. And so recognizing that that's okay too, that it's going to take some time, but the key is being intentional about it and carving out that space intentionally, and then setting small goals that then lead towards bigger goals.
That's really helpful. Monique, I feel like we could have a whole series with you, really. I feel like there's so much to learn in what you're saying, but there's something about the intentionality, there's something about noticing and naming, and almost, it feels like it's feeding in so many of the conversations we're having at the moment are kind of just layers of the same conversation, I feel almost. But this sense of like the rule of life that we've been playing around with as well, where it's all about addressing like the priorities and then translating that into everyday living. So like what am I living for, and then pulling that back to kind of so how, you know, what are the habits I'm going to build, what are the things that are absolute priorities for me to be thriving, and then also for my household. So whether that's a housemate and a dog, or whether that is a little family, or whether that's a multi-generation, you know, generational family kind of living together, there's this question about what does it look like for each one of us to be thriving, and what are our priorities in this season, but then beyond this season as well, what are our priorities, and how do we live lives that mirror those priorities. And it feels like we're kind of going kind of circling the same thing, which is so interesting. But this whole idea about, you know, what are we living for, what are our lives, what are our lives, kind of what are the rhythms of our lives that are kind of leading to us living those lives. I think sadly we're going to have to call an end to this particular section of our time together. But I would love you to, Monique, I'd love you to stay on and comment and respond to probably all sorts of questions that will have emerged from what you've said. So do stay with us. But thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it. Yeah, it's been amazing.
Thanks, Monique.
This is the joy, right? This is the joy and the gift of being able to connect globally in a new way. It's amazing.
Let's have some emoji love for Monique. And Monique, why don't you leave the meeting and then jump on Facebook and just feel free to join the conversation, because I'm sure there's lots of questions coming in on there as well, and you can field some of them. But thank you so much. That was so helpful. Really good to.
My pleasure. So nice to be with you. Cool. Thank you.
We'll see you
guys.
Thanks, Monique.
Cheers.
Thank you. Thanks.
Well, if you've just joined us, we are live on Facebook. We started late, so we're going to beg your permission to go slightly later tonight, but you're really welcome to also go. It's all good. But thanks for tuning in. We're thinking about St. Francis of Assisi, and tonight we're thinking about sowing love. And just keep the conversation going. It's really great to hear from different people. Jan made a really good comment where she just quoted something from Richard Rohr, which I encourage you to read. Just read it in the comments below. And Alex is probably about to quote him as well now. So Alex, why don't you tell us what this Bible passage is all about from today as we kind of come to land?
So again, there are so many things we can say about this passage, but we're going to keep it pretty simple really as we land. So we started, didn't we, with this idea of St. Francis of Assisi. Lord, make me an instrument of your peace. Where there is hatred, let me sow love. And we just dived in, and it's just been there in the background as we've gathered and talked. But we dived into passage 1 Corinthians 13 verses 4-8. Love is patient, love is kind. Love is not envious or boastful or arrogant or rude. It does not insist on its own way. It is not irritable or resentful. It does not rejoice in wrongdoing, but rejoices in the truth. It bears all things. It believes all things. It hopes all things. It endures all things. Love never ends. That was the passage. And I wonder what phrase it was for you, or whether it was a word or a little short phrase that stood out this evening. Perhaps it's something that is pertinent for tonight, or perhaps it's particularly kind of stirred in you in this strange season that we're all in. Make me an instrument of your peace. There is a sense that peacemaking is absolutely active. It's love in action. It's intentional and it's costly. Dan and John talked last week, didn't they, about the Trinity as a dance, and it is absolutely my favorite description of this 3-in-1, this triune God, this beautiful image of community. And I think it struck me that it is the very best model of what it is to be in relationship, this divine dance. There's this beautiful little section in this book from the Iona community in Scotland who write this: the holy community joining hands together and joyfully being in relationship with one another. Sometimes it's God who's the one who keeps the underlying beat going, and then Jesus might teach a new step that the others have not even thought of yet, and the Spirit will improvise the tune so that the tempo and the rhythm is not always the same. Isn't that a great little image? But they are always in step. They are always focusing on one another, even as each is aware of the particular part that they will play in the dance. And they want to share that dance with us, to teach us the steps, to help us to hear the music. The Father reaches out in love, inviting us to dance, to show us these moves called grace and wonder and laughter and peace. And the Son connects with us in love, taking us by the hand to draw us into the dance, whether we are hurting or angry, whether we are grieving or broken or lost. And the Spirit welcomes us, enfolding us in love as we are taught to dance with abandon, with kindness, with hope, and with gentleness. And as we dance, we discover that the Trinity is not so much a doctrine, a set of beliefs, but it is a relationship with us. It's this divine dance that Richard Rohr talks about. He has a book called Divine Dance, and he says this: whatever is going on in God is a flow, this radical relatedness, a perfect communion between three, a circle dance of love. And God is not just the dancer, but the dance itself. As the early fathers of the church dared to call it, the Greek perichoresis. Oh dear, I've got that completely wrong. Perichoresis. I'm so sorry. Perichoresis. The Greek perichoresis, the origin of the word choreography. If we take the depiction of God and the Trinity seriously, then we have to say, in the beginning was the relationship. So there's this incredible model of relationship right from the very first words of the Bible. Each are noticing and serving each other's needs, and they're releasing and they're making room for the other. So there's this mutual love and this mutual thriving, making room for the other to flourish. So no one actually has to be self-serving in this model of relationship, of community, because of the sacrifice and the freedom and the love of the others. There's no need to be kind of concerned about your own needs. And crucially, it's not at the cost of one member. It's not one suffering and falling apart whilst holding the rest together, but everyone has their cost. Dallas Willard, who's another kind of spiritual hero of mine, talks of many things, but he talks of how we often see those who really cherish one another seriously or even just playfully trying to outgive one another. And he comments that's how relationships should be. I love that idea of outgiving one another, that would be something we would observe in people who have a deep love for one another. And I guess it just struck me, what would it look like if our relationships look like that divine dance? What if our family relationships look like that? What if our closest friendships look like that? Our church community looked like that? What if our marriages look like this divine dance? Our neighborhoods, our global relations? That would be a taste of this radical, countercultural, grace-filled kingdom that Jesus invites us to build with him. And I guess I want to ask us, what would one step towards that look like for us today? And that might be all sorts of things. It might be, perhaps it's something that you heard Monique say around just thinking about the vision, the priorities right now for your family, or for your household, whoever's in that household. And almost thinking about what that looks like in this season. It might be going back to that rule of life that we've talked about for the last few weeks. It keeps kind of re-emerging. And maybe it's about not just thinking about a rule of life for myself, but actually what would a rule of life look like for all of us? What would it look like for our whole household? Maybe for those of us who are married, of which there are a few of us at H3O in that kind of category, we want to invite you to come and be a part of the marriage course that's going to be running in the next few weeks. So that might be one step. It's just, I guess it's thinking about that next step and going on that journey.
Wonderful, Alex. So good. Really helpful stuff. Good to hear you share that. And it was interesting, wasn't it, how that emerged, that you wanted to talk about the divine dance today and hadn't, obviously you were listening really intently last week, but you actually hadn't realized that we mentioned it last week, partly because of our internet in DY. But yeah, it really feels like there is something in that, this idea of creating space for the other, this kind of mutual space making for one another. So yeah, it's really great to add to that. So I'd encourage you to read that passage throughout the week. And like Alex said, we've got the marriage course coming up. Alex is going to pray for us at the end, but we thought we'd do a couple of notices. But Alex, do you want to start by just sharing a little bit about that? If you've just joined us on Facebook, we're just talking about relationships. We're about 3 or 4 minutes off the end, but we'd love, church would not be church without notices. So Alex, tell us about the marriage course.
Yeah, so the marriage course is, it's one way. There are loads of amazing ways to invest in your marriage, but the marriage course is one really incredible way. We're going to be running it at church, so I guess very often you'd host it in a physical space, you do nice meals and all that kind of stuff. We're not going to be able to do that this time, but that actually feels like a real opportunity. So we're going to make it kind of as flexible as we can. So it's going to start from Monday the 10th or the 11th, can't even think, for that week, Monday the 10th of May. So week beginning Monday the 10th of May, it will run for 7 weeks. And really the idea is that if you are a married couple, however short or long you've been married for, it's an incredible opportunity really just to find a 2-hour window at any point in that week, ideally as a regular window then that you go back to each week, to kind of work through the materials, the discussions, the kind of things to think about, and you just stream or download the 2-hour video and you watch it, and the encouragement I guess is to carve that time out and to make that as special as possible, so it doesn't become this kind of thing you're having to tick off in the week, but it's actually a really special time of kind of connecting together. We're going to try and make it extra special and remind you that we're thinking of you and that we're praying for you, by just partnering with the amazing team at Global Sisters and our dear friend and church member Heather. So we're going to have a few treats that we're going to buy from Global Sisters. And they are just going to appear on your doorstep over those weeks, not every week, but just little surprises at a few points along the way, as a way of investing in those incredible projects, but also while you're making that evening special and investing in your marriage. So that's great as well. That's a real bonus. It runs 7 weeks. It's 2 hours, and that's just let us know which email should they email down.
Yeah, I'll just put it in the comments below. So it's pinned in the comments. Email us at hello@h3o.church. That's O, not 0. We've all made that mistake before. So yeah, send us an email and we'd love to hear from you. We're really...
There's a small cost down as well. It might be worth just throwing in the cost. Is that okay? Just to explain in one line. Really, it's just to say that we're doing a suggested, I know we're over time, we're doing a suggested donation of $40. Now that's something that if that's tricky at this time, then just don't even worry, it'll be covered, it'll be sorted. But it's a suggested donation really, so we can contribute to Global Sisters and we can buy some nice treats for you. So if that's preventative, don't worry. If you can pay a little bit extra for someone else, then do. So that's all about that. Thanks.
Wonderful. Thanks, Alex. That was great. And Alex has been working really hard, just like pulling that together with a team. So we're really looking forward to that. Such a good way to invest in stuff. And we've had people from outside the church sign up. So if you've got people you want to invite, it's a great time to do that. The other thing that's still happening, you can join Alpha in any of the first 3 weeks. Alpha started last Wednesday. It was really great. We gathered online. Someone from England came, which was always fun. Though obviously we much for Australians, but wherever you are in the world, you can join us, say 7:30 Australian time in the evening. And if you missed last week, we can post the video. We did that on our Facebook page, but we can send that to you. So send us an email. And the other thing to say is Jan's rhyme time. I mean, it probably helps if you've got kids, if you want to turn up for it, but it's really great rhyme time. So 11 o'clock in the morning, there'll be a post about it in the morning on our Facebook page with a Zoom link, but it's just a rhyme time. The kids love it. Jump on, it'd be really good to see you there. So we're going to keep gathering online for the next little while. We're hoping that's going to shift maybe in the next couple of months. We don't know what that'll look like, but we may be able to meet in small groups. But this is a great time for us as church to just think differently about how we gather and embrace what's available to us. So we're just working on that. Thank you so much for leaning in. Thank you for all your comments. There's been so much good stuff as ever. And we just want to say again, you guys are making this like work for us. Like you're making this work for our church because you're leaning in, because you're commenting. And so any ideas or feedback you've got, please let us know. Next week we'll be looking at the next line of St. Francis's prayer and continuing our theme of thinking about channel of peace. How can we be channels of peace at this time? So thank you so much. We'll see you all soon. Alex, why don't you finish by praying the prayer of St. Francis?
Great. So let's pray together as we close. Lord, make me an instrument of your peace. Where there is hatred, let me sow love. Where there is injury, pardon. Where there is doubt, faith. Where there is despair, hope. Where there is darkness, light. Where there is sadness, joy. O divine Master, grant that I may not so much seek to be consoled as to console, to be understood as to understand, to be loved as to love. For it is in giving that we receive, and it is in pardoning that we are pardoned, and it is in dying that we are born to eternal life.